Hello and welcome to the Say It Sister podcast. I'm Lucy and
I'm Karen, and we're thrilled to have you here. Our paths crossed years ago on a shared journey of self-discovery, and what we found was an unshakable bond and a mutual desire to help others heal and live their very best lives.
For years we've had open, honest and courageous conversations, discussions that challenged us, lifted us and sometimes even brought us to tears. Now we want to share those conversations with you. We believe that by letting you into our world, you might find the courage to use your voice and say what really needs to be said in your own life.
Whether you're a woman seeking empowerment, a self-improvement enthusiast, or someone who craves thought-provoking dialogue, join us as we promise to bring you real, unfiltered conversations that encourage self-reflection and growth.
So join us as we explore, question and grow together. It's time to say it, sister. Hey, sisters, welcome back. And today it's going to be the Angry Say It Sister episode. Well, we're talking about anger, and not as something shameful or dangerous, but as a wise messenger that tells us something isn't right. An anger that shows up to inform us that there's something off, an injustice, a boundary crossed, or just an unacceptable behaviour, even a betrayal. And you know, we are a couple of midlife, perimenopausal women, and you may not know that our podcast was born from some of that anger, some of that rage that we were feeling. And it's that anger that simmers. It's been pushed down pretty much our whole lives. We've tolerated it. But then, as our hormones go all over the place, this anger rises within us. It's kind of like when we were teenagers, except now we're a lot more regulated. You know, we have this older, wiser and more experienced outlook. We recognise the anger and the rage and we channel it in a different way. And each one of the topics that we talk about on this podcast comes from this low-level anger. And so we thought we'd talk about it today. And actually, the topic was brought by our wonderful Karen. So hi, Karen. What was it that made you want to talk about anger today?
I'm using anger a lot and I'm working with a lot of angry women. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit further down the line. But for me, let's get personal about it. I feel like I've got this simmering anger inside me. And it's a little bit like sometimes it's like the start of the boiling kettle, and other times it's extremely powerful. And I think the difference for me now as a perimenopausal woman is that I have the tools and the techniques. So rather than being like, I can't do the anger, I don't do anger, not sure what to do with that, I'll stuff it down, I don't do that. I actually take control of my anger and do something about it. So I can channel it, like you said, but I also know that if I'm very angry, there are certain things that I can do to calm my system down so that I can not ignore it, still do something about it, but not from like the kettle is like on full steam. Because when I'm in that place, it feels so awful in my body because I know that I've lost control of something. And actually what I really want is to make my point. So the other thing I know about anger is it's a cover. So it's almost like the fog that comes across on a sunny day. You've got the sun there and, then the anger comes across and then you can't see the sun anymore. And it's over it. Yet underneath, there's so much more. And it could be, I'll talk about myself. I definitely, when I get angry, often there is a deep sadness inside, something that really, really, really goes into my heart. That is often the place where I would go to before. So when I was younger, I would go into the sadness rather than the anger and feel that. Whereas now I allow myself to feel the anger and then I get to the emotions underneath, because there's something happening that's far deeper than the actual anger that's happening. And when we can get to that point, we can really find out what we need. I also realize that I'm more powerful than I ever thought I was. And I also realize that I want more for myself. So that's where it takes me. What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I feel it in my chest. It's like, again, it's that bubbling. But it's almost like, for me, it's like this fire comes up within me. And the unskilled version of myself would just let it rip. But it would never let it rip in an overt way. It would come out in a really unhealthy way. So I would project it onto the people that I love the most and just snap at them or end up being critical over things because I needed to get it out. And now, like you say, we've got the skills and tools to say, I'm feeling this, whether it's this fire or this cloud coming over, and recognizing like, okay, what is really winding me up? A lot of it is hormonal. So I feel like the rage and the anger comes up at certain times of the month, but it's what's beneath the surface, and I usually find out that it's something that somebody has said or done, or something in conflict with myself that bubbles it up. And so then I'm able to recognize it. And what I tend to then do is do a little bit of work around why I'm feeling that way. A bit like yourself, what's that secondary emotion that it's kind of clouding? And what generally happens then for me now in my wiser years is that I sit with it. I might do a bit of research or go and do a bit of journaling and try and really focus it. And so by the time I'm able to action my anger, it's from a lot healthier place, and I'm not using it on other people. I'm using it to change something. So for me, I think anger comes from conflict. And it's usually an inner conflict with myself where I haven't got the skills or the words yet to be able to express myself. So I need to do that work, and then I'm there. I'm writing, I'm speaking, I'm doing whatever I need to do to express myself. And the heat goes out of it, so it's like more like embers burning rather than huge bonfires burning.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I spent many years studying minds, and I did a lot of work with an organization called More to Life. And this was really around helping us to control what our mind was doing. Because you know what it's like, you get the emotion and then your saboteur is like straight in there. And if we're not able to manage that very fast sort of response, because anger is so powerful, it takes over our body, and our mind then gets engaged. It's like, you have to do this, you have to do that. Make sure they don't do that. Make sure you let them know. We're in that behavioral pattern, which we all have. And we're out of control. We're out of our control. And that's the bit where I hate, that's why I hate that feeling, because it's like I've lost myself, and that calm, steady, grounded person that I also am she's not in the driving seat anymore. And it's not a good energy to put out into the world. So you say something angry to me, I might respond to you. Then you say something angry to the next person. And this is like a fire, and it's being caught. And I see it all the time. And, if you're on the roads, you see the road rage impact on people. And I have to admit, one of my trigger points is road rage. So if I get that kind of beep at me, or someone, says something to me or gives me a finger or whatever, it's so hard for me to not respond to that. But I've learned how to, but I can still feel that, all the emotional responses are there. My brain is telling me what to do back, but I don't. And then I have to go away and do my tapping, or I might shout under a pillow or punch some pillows or do whatever, because I know it's a physical experience in my body. And until I move that through, it's sitting in my cells, it's sitting in my stomach, it's in my chest. And if I really don't deal with it, it's going to impact my voice. And so that is something that I know about myself. So I was really grateful to understand what my trigger points were. The life shock moments that you're talking about, I'm talking about it from a road rage perspective. Something happens that's outside of me, out of my control. And the anger is right there. And I would say anger is probably one of the most common emotions that we experience. But as women, we've been told to not show our anger, to not move from our anger. So what we do is we stuff it down, and then it lives on the inside. And when we get into perimenopause and our hormones do their thing, which is what they're supposed to be doing, it's awful. And I had lunch with a friend last week, and she said to me, I smashed my first plate this week. And I was like, go on, go for it. That's amazing. I said, was anyone in the house? She said, no. And I went, even better. It's like the moments we almost have to take care of it on our own in a way. We can have a rant to a friend, but generally that doesn't do it, I don't think. It's like those moments when we go, right, this is mine to own and to release, and then we do the work. So she was like, I'm going to do it again. And it felt amazing. We were laughing about it because she got past the point of the rage by smashing the plate. And I was like, there's many times that I've wanted to smash plates and I've not done that one yet. But I might have thrown something at a wall or something like that. But you know what I mean? And it's like, what's wrong with that? As long as no one's at the other side of it, it's all good.
And I think there's also that shame about it, because there's probably a lot of plates being smashed on kitchen floors, and nobody talks about it. And so, because we still think that that's not how good girls behave, or
Yeah.
that's not, that shows that I'm out of control. And it's not, that's actually quite a controlled way of releasing your anger, because you're not actually impacting anybody else. You're not asserting your anger on another person. And there are some
Yeah.
really good ways to be able to release. But I think
Let me just interject on that, because it's
yeah,
bringing up something for me about the menopause. Because many, many, many centuries ago, the menopause was obviously, it's linked into the moon, but it was like this idea of when women went into the menopause, it was linked into like lunatics, basically. So women became crazy, and a lot of women got sectioned. And I think that still happens, but it's on a lesser degree. So they were having all this, changes on the inside, which does impact your emotions on a huge, huge level in the brain and in the body. And you don't really have the ability to know what to do about it unless you know what to do and you get support. So you had all these women basically being, more emotional, and they thought they were losing it. And so they ended up being, taken to the lunatic ward.
they never came out. My great grandmother never came out. She died there. And for her, it was in her post baby years. So, I suppose it would be postnatal depression now. And she was sectioned for being hysterical. And that was the word that was put on her admission form. Yeah, she never came out.
Yeah.
And it's just actually really inconvenient for society to have a woman with anger, or a woman to have emotions and to openly express them. And yeah, the lunatic asylum. And these words are so dangerous that it puts us into that shame place, because this isn't very long ago where a man could section his wife, and he could even just make it up. Because if she was inconveniently in the way of his life plans, that's what would happen. And so it's within my grandparents and your grandparents' generation where that was happening.
And that is the stigma and the shame that sits inside, that gets passed along. And obviously we're breaking a lot of that. Our generation are the women that are breaking that and talking about it and saying, this is what we need, and becoming much more clear about the journey, which is absolutely amazing. But, it wasn't like that before. And so this is new ground. I want to say that if we've never dealt with any of our anger, up until this point, then we've got a lot of work to do. And a lot of releasing to do. And, I remember when I was in my 30s, I went off to the Smoky Mountains in America, and I did a training program called Way of the Warrior. And it was about being your own type of warrior, like a warrior of the spirit, someone who can deal with like life uncertainties and still respond from an open-hearted, creative place. And I did this beautiful training program. And I had done a little bit of anger releasing before, which I felt deeply uncomfortable about in training rooms, where it was like getting some of it out. And I always really struggled, because I would almost go mute, and there'd be a bit of a shutdown for me. And we went into this room in the evening, and it was getting dark, and there were all these huge Native American drums, massive drums. And we stood in a circle, and they started to bang these drums, and it was about releasing the rage. And it was a mixed group, men and women. And the men were kind of a lot faster than the women. And there was mats around the room, and you could just go lie on a mat if you didn't want to participate, or if you just needed a bit more time, or if you needed time out. So you've got like 20 people releasing their rage and this drumming's going on. It was so evocative, just letting it go. And it was like, if not now, when? Was what I kept saying to myself. And I was on this mat. I just cried and cried and cried. I'm getting emotional. I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't let go. I don't do anger. And then someone came along and got hold of my hand and sort of took me into this circle where things were like happening. And I was like, if not now, when? If not now, when? And then it was almost like something took over me. I became like animal-like. And I released it. I don't know if I went the full force at that point, but I released it. Then I went back and I cried. And this went on for an hour, screaming, shouting, crying. It was so incredibly intense. And I look back now, and it moves me so much, because I realized how hard it was for me to get into the energy of the rage that was inside me. And no one was making me do it. It wasn't like I have to do this to perform. It was just really hard.
I had a similar experience even just like a couple of weeks ago at my women's circle. And I've always thought I've been quite good at expressing my rage. because I've always been quite open about saying, asserting my boundaries or speaking up when something doesn't work for me. However, I was still doing it in a very controlled manner. And we had a women's circle, and the focus was anger. And I was probably the oldest woman in the room. I maybe, but there were a lot of women there in their 30s, etc. And so I'm like, I'm going to go all in here. And when the music came on, I was like dancing like an idiot, and I was like letting it all out and waving my arms around. I was like really exhaling my breath, and letting out some like wolf-like sounds, really getting there. And actually, it then became contagious because the other women realised that it was safe to do it. And then at the end of it, we were all laughing and cheering and celebrating because the intensity of the feeling was so beautiful, but we were all really held. And that's one thing that I would like to just speak to, is letting out your anger and your rage. It is a huge experience. And I would always say, do it where you feel safe, because there's a lot of big emotions that will come up. And I only could release it because I felt safe and I was in that other place. However, there are lots of daily rituals that I do to release it. And there's nothing better than going and lobbing down a bush, or cutting up wood, or lighting a fire, going for a run or a walk, or writing in your journal. There are so many different ways that you can start to release it. But I think for me, the most powerful thing is letting it come out of my voice.
Absolutely.
And saying the words out loud, even if it's just to me, like, I hate this, I'm not happy, this is unfair, and just letting it out. What do you make of that? Is that something?
The best way for me and for anyone is what I would say the simplest, the best. Because the thing is, anger doesn't really have, I mean, it might come out as words a bit later, but the pure feeling of anger is almost like wordless. It's more noise, it's more sound. That's what I learned. Like, people shouting, no. You can say no over and over and over and over and over again. And you don't have to be screaming and shouting to do that. You can just feel the force of the no from within your body and give it the no if you want, or you can literally just make noises. I mean, for me, once I got past around quite a few rounds of no's, couldn't say that anymore. It was more like it was visceral, and it was like sound, and movement and just force. And you can push against the wall, let go, push against the wall, let go with a no, you do that a few times, your body's going to start to release it. Now, what we both did was in a safe environment, and we were, you've got the safety of your own home, but obviously we're always being conscious of, you need to be a little bit conscious of what's going on around you, like what's on the street, who's in the house. You can play loud music, maybe. That's one way of creating a cover. I used to do it in the car a lot, because I was in the car on my own. I'd put music on, be driving
I think a lot of women do that.
Yeah, and I'd have a good no, and just keep going until I felt the release in my body that enabled me to say yes again. Because the reason we're responding from that place is because we have a big no in our body. No, it might be not even happening in this moment. It could be I'm saying no to that guy who just beat me, or that woman who's just beat me and is showing aggression towards me. It could be that, or it could be that no comes from years and years and years of no's. And that's the bit. And I would say, get help with this. If you I couldn't possibly do that, because I was that person. I was like, this is not me. I am a kind person and I don't do anger. And I see that in a lot of my clients, where they start to have an angry response when we go into the field of emotion, and they're like, shouldn't be getting emotion. I mean, I'm privileged. I've got such a lovely life. And they get into the justification as to why they shouldn't feel the anger.
I also think that there's a fear because they've never experienced it. They are completely unskilled. They're like, oh, what do I do now it's here? So they push it back down because it's scary.
Exactly. And they're not, it's not something we've been taught to manage or deal with. And it's one of the strongest emotions. And I look out in the world and I see a release of anger everywhere I go. And then I have to remind myself that there are two people being angry and the rest of the people around are not. I went to a gig on Saturday and there was a brawl that broke out of this gig. And I am not kidding you. There were 30,000 people in a stadium. And I think maybe about 4 people got into a brawl. And it was the most horrific thing. And to say that it deeply affected me is not even true. I've been tapping about it ever since. And I was like, and I have to keep saying to myself, 20,000 people, 4 people 20,000 people, 4 people. It's like the rest of it was not like that. And it was such an amazing experience, and the music and everything, and people were having the best time. But unfortunately, it has a bigger impact on people and it spreads out. And so we have a responsibility to handle it, I think, is what I want to say. And if you don't know how to handle it, then you go get help. You work with an expert.
I think all of us at some stage have witnessed some of that overt anger being, we see it on social media all the time, where people are writing down their anger and projecting it towards people they don't even know. But when you see the actual physical, violent anger out there on the streets, it does stay with you. You have to be able to release it. But there's a very different way that, for women in particular, how we've been taught to do anger. And it comes out in a much more passive-aggressive kind of style. And it's still as equally harmful as the physical outlet, which you tend to see a lot more men showing, because that's how they were taught as children, to get into a brawl or on the rugby pitch or whatever it is. But with women, you tend to see things like withdrawal. So I can't deal with it, so I'm just going to withdraw from this situation. I'm going to do the whole flight or freeze kind of response, because that's the safest way, even though they need to be able to express their anger. They might show up as perfectionism, because I can't control these things around me, so I'm going to try and be the most perfect version of everything, which is crucifying us. And we start seeing it, coming through in physical body symptoms, because of all the suppression, when it's autoimmune, exhaustion, burnout. And I think that's something that a lot of women don't realise, that this constant managing our anger, suppressing it, actually shows up in our bodies when it's just saying, I can't do this anymore. And I know, this from family members where they have had major stress in their lives, and they got arthritis, an autoimmune version of arthritis, and they've had it for the rest of their lives. They've had to manage it because they've never allowed themselves to even acknowledge the pain that they went through and the anger and the injustice that happened to them.
Absolutely.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
I can, and I can talk about my own physical experience of things as well. After sexual assault, I became very ill because I didn't speak up about it for quite a long time. I was trying to process it myself. And 2 months later, it was like the November time. I was in bed for most of that month. I was so ill. I was exhausted. I just couldn't function. And I was doing stuff from my bed on my laptop. And they did some bloods and my platelets were through the roof, like extremely high. And so then I got referred, and they kept doing the bloods and they kept coming back really high. So I got referred to the hospital, and the ward so basically they ended up testing me for leukemia, because my platelets were so high over a consistent area of time. This went on for quite a long time, actually. But once they did the bone marrow test, they said it's not leukemia. I knew what it was. I was like, this is because I've gone into shock, and the state of what's going on the inside is so extreme. It's like I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that's when I ended up then talking about it and, doing some therapy and all the rest of it. And it took me on a big, massive journey of healing. There was so much uncovering that I had to do, not just around that sexual assault. There was so much that I had stuffed down and ignored, that over time, I was able to sort of deal with things and deal with it from an adult point of view. But that impact on my body, was so huge and actually really terrifying, because, I also had a daughter a bit further down the line. So I'm going to the hospital with my 6-month-old baby, being tested for leukemia. It was terrifying. Sat next to people who were having treatment for leukemia in the waiting rooms and things. It was like, was I feeling, I think I was feeling a whole rage of things and range of things at that point, when I became quite ill. It wasn't just anger. There was shock. There was confusion. I was highly disturbed on the inside. The anger came a little bit later. My platelets are still a bit off, but I know it's a new range for me. And if I go over a certain point, then I have to go back to the hospital. So that's the longer term impact. Something shifted so big inside me that it changed my blood platelet levels. We can't. I don't think we can deny it anymore. And that's what I want to say to anyone who's listening, who knows that they are suppressing, ignoring. Over time, we end up having different patterns in our bodies. And so please do something about it. It's not okay to just ignore these strong emotions, because they will make us poorly in the end.
I think we've all seen examples of women expressing their anger. And I thought we could just have a quick chat about some of the ways that we've seen women channel. And when my friend found out that her husband had cheated on her, she went into an absolute rage. And it was bubbling for about 2 weeks. She was trying to hold it together for the kids and, trying to do the typical woman thing and be composed. And then one day she just drank, and she was like, she needed just to numb it. And then I laughed because this is so untypical of her. And she went and found his car, and she was kicking it. She was beating it with a stick because she needed to get it out of her. And yeah, it caused the right reaction. She didn't get into any trouble, but it started, her her husband at the time actually realised just how much she was deeply affected. And so a whole dialogue came of it from there. But she needed to be able to release. And it was, like I said, so unlike her. But then I've also had another friend who was so angry about the way that her child had been treated in a certain situation, and this was in a medical situation, that everything she was doing, she felt completely powerless about, and it was that injustice. This is not fair. This is not right. And she channeled that into opening a charity, so that no other family had to go through what she was going through again. And part of that is lobbying. So she's channeled her anger in a way that is actually going to change things, or at least help other people and get advice. And other people I know started going to raid rooms and just smashing things. And they're up and down the country. And we've also got by us an art installation where you can go and just throw paint at the wall and create something out of it. So they're just a few of the examples where I've seen women channeling in healthy or unhealthy ways. But we've got to be honest about it. Women are releasing it everywhere. What examples have you got?
I mean, I'm not thinking of many, to be honest. Like, there's not many, I can't think of any negative ways. There probably are in there, but there's nothing coming through for me. I see a lot of trailblazing women, and they can be with the pain point. And if you work with them, they're like, this is the pain point. But then they'll go away. And I think there's a lot of women out there doing this now, and we are certainly doing it as well. This is the pain point. This is the issue. Okay, so what solutions can we come up with? And also, what do we need to do for ourselves within that? Because just coming up with solutions, if you're feeling the pain point and you've not dealt with the pain point, is still good, but it's not fully embodied. So I see more examples of that, women that are just like, I can't stand this anymore. I have to do something. And they channel that under, and it actually underneath it, there's passion. And I always say to them, remember that you are really passionate. And so when your fire gets ignited, there is a deeper call for something, and use your passion, use the passion side of it instead of the rage to move you forward. And the difference sometimes is literally about just taking some time to breathe, and let that energy move through, or push against the walls, or punch some pillows, or, smash a plate because when no one's in the house, or say a round of no's, like we've just been saying. That can be the difference of going, I still feel like I need to do something, but I'm not doing it from a triggered point of view, because actually that energy is just getting replaced. The energy goes into what we do. And so we want to shift it. So that is the one that I always go back to, because these women are really passionate.
Yeah.
And so we.
Yeah, and I think that's where my anger goes to. It goes to a passion for a cause. I use it, I channel it in a way. But I have to say that every time I open up my phone, I seem to be confronted with another thing that is going to trigger me into my anger, because there are so many injustices in the world. And so I'm having to do a lot of that processing within myself to be able to say, right, I can't fix everything. I can, I have to be able to channel my energy into one or two things that are going to make a real difference. because otherwise I think it just turns you into hopelessness, which even exacerbates the anger, because then you are feeling completely out of control. So that's some of the advice that I would give, is once you recognize what's beneath that anger, try and channel it into something that you can absolutely make a difference in, because otherwise it will just it'll just compact. And when my youngest was about 3, she got to this, well, yeah, probably 2 or 3, those terrible 2s. There's a lot of anger and frustration that are coming through at those ages, which is why they have the tantrums. And she had this Frozen, that's the cartoon character, the Frozen pillow. And I said to her, right, I want you to use this as your anger pillow. And so whenever you're feeling it, I want you to go and do whatever you need to do to that pillow, whether it's scream, cry, punch it, throw it around the room, whatever you do. I said, but you don't project your feelings onto other people, because it was usually me or a sister that was getting it in the neck. And I've got to say that fast forward, well, she's 17 now. She is probably the most emotionally stable human I know, because from a young age I was saying anger is good, but you need to go away and work it out over there and express it there. And when you're ready, then come back and then we'll talk about it. And they're the kind of skills that I want all of our listeners to know, that you can have these outbursts. For me, it's usually 4 non-blondes or Killing in the Name of by
yes, one of mine too.
Yeah, get that on loud and dance around the kitchen and just somatically get it out of yourselves and out of your body, process it, and then I'm like, okay, now I can come from that level-headed, mature space. Whereas before I was coming from the level-headed, but it wasn't mature because I still hadn't processed it. I was just suppressing it. It's a completely different edge. So I'd really like you to just share one truly practical piece of advice, and not just for the perimenopausal women, to all women out there. What would be your greatest gift of advice right now?
Anger's normal. If we live in our world, we cannot get away with living our lives without feeling angry. It's impossible. So every time the anger rises, give it permission. Say, welcome, I give you permission. And then decide what you're going to do about it. But give it permission first, because that's the crucial thing. I think things get bigger when we ignore them. And that's when you see it spilling out. So, you could call it, give it a name. You really sort of like just tune into it a little bit and see what it wants to tell you. And I can guarantee you, if you listen to it and you get the messages, you're going to feel a lot lighter, number one, but it's going to give you some vital information about something that you need for yourself, because the reason it's there is because something's being compromised. So listen rather than ignore, and then decide, choose something that'll help you release it, and then make a decision on what you're going to do about it. That's my thing. And if you can do a tapping, like this is the one under the chin here, the shame point, I would say do this and get into that shame point under the lip and just tap away. And I've got a nice deep breath that just came in then, so don't feel, it's like, get rid of the shame that you're feeling about the anger. I think that's so practical. Anyone can do that. It takes a couple of seconds and you're back. Yeah. What about you?
Such a gift. Thank you. And before we wrap up, which I'm going to let you do, I just want to give a prompt to our listeners, really, whether it's a journal or just a thought process that's going to carry around your day. But if anger had a voice in you right now, what would it say? I'm just going to leave you with that.
Well, keep us updated on how you're getting on. Send us a message. Leave us in. We want to hear the small stories from your own lives. And please, please, please stay connected to your own heart. This is the way forward, sisters.
So thanks for listening, and we can't wait to welcome you next time.
Until then, use your voice, journal, speak or sing out loud. However you do it, we hope you join us in
Saying It Sister.